In 1903, an American anthropologist arrived on a remote Pacific island called Yap. He found a society with a functioning economy, but they didn't use coins or paper. Their money consisted of massive limestone wheels, some weighing over 4 tons. You couldn't put it in your pocket. In fact, some of their money was sitting at the bottom of the ocean and people were still spending it. Here is what happened. The stones, called rai, weren't naturally found on Yap. They had to be carved on a different island, Palau, and transported hundreds of miles back on bamboo rafts. It was dangerous work. Generations ago, a crew was bringing back a massive stone when a violent storm hit. To save the boat, they had to push the stone overboard. It sank to the bottom of the Pacific. When the crew got back to Yap, they told everyone what happened. And the village elders made a decision that sounds completely insane, but is actually brilliant. They decided the stone still existed. The crew had done the work, the value was real. So the family was credited with owning a giant stone at the bottom of the ocean, and they used it to buy things. They traded ownership of a rock nobody could see. If you ask most people how money started, they'll tell you a simple story. They'll say that before money, humans used barter. I have 10 chickens, you have a goat, we trade. It makes sense. It's simple. It's also completely wrong. In 1776, Adam Smith wrote that barter was the natural state of early economies. But there is a glaring problem. No anthropologist in history has ever found a pure barter economy. Not one. When researchers actually look at how ancient hunter-gatherers traded, they don't find people haggling over goats and chickens. They find something much deeper. For roughly 300,000 years, humans lived in small bands of about 50 to 150 people. You knew everyone. You grew up with them. If you killed a deer, you didn't trade a piece of meat for a flint knife. You just gave the meat away to anyone who was hungry. Why? Because you knew them. And more importantly, they knew you. When you handed over that meat, you created a social debt. You didn't write it down, you didn't ask for a coin, you just remembered it. And so did they. When winter came and you were starving, the person you gave meat to in the summer would share their food with you. The currency wasn't gold, or shells, or silver. The currency was memory. If someone didn't pay back their social debt, if they were selfish and took without giving, they lost their reputation. In a world where you couldn't survive alone, losing your reputation meant exile. And exile meant death. So, for the vast majority of human history, debt wasn't a financial problem. It was a biological survival mechanism. But that system has a critical limit. It only works if you know everyone. Human memory is incredible, but anthropologists have found that our brains can only track complex social relationships for about 150 people. That limit is called Dunbar's number. Once a village grows beyond that, once you have thousands of people living together, you can't remember who owes what to whom. The trust breaks down. Around 6,000 years ago, humans started building the first massive cities in Mesopotamia. Places like Uruk had tens of thousands of people. Suddenly, you had strangers living next to each other. You couldn't run an economy on memory anymore. You needed something permanent. So they invented writing. We like to think the first writing was for poetry or religion, to record the deeds of gods and kings. It wasn't. The oldest writing we have ever found is a spreadsheet. Cuneiform clay tablets from Sumeria recording who owed grain, who delivered sheep, and who hadn't paid their taxes. They didn't invent writing to tell stories. They invented writing to track debt. And here's where it gets wild. They recorded all these debts in a unit called the shekel. But a shekel wasn't a coin? Not yet. A shekel was just a specific weight of barley or silver. You didn't actually hand someone a silver shekel. You just wrote down that they owed you a shekel's worth of goods. Money was completely invisible. It was an abstract unit of measurement, exactly like an inch or a degree of temperature. You don't hand someone an inch, you use an inch to measure distance. In ancient Mesopotamia, you used a shekel to measure trust. For thousands of years, the greatest empires in the world ran their economies on clay tablets and abstract math. You could go to a tavern in Babylon, order a beer, and the bartender would put it on your tab. At harvest time, you'd settle the debt with grain. No physical money ever changed hands. The entire system ran on the exact same logic as the Yap Island stone at the bottom of the ocean. The ledger was all that mattered. So, if invisible credit worked so well, why did we ever invent physical coins? The answer isn't trade. The answer is war. Around the 7th century BC in Lydia, which is modern-day Turkey, kings were trying to expand their borders by raising massive armies of mercenaries. But mercenaries don't fight for abstract credit. If you're a hired killer, you don't want a clay tablet saying the king owes you grain next year. You might be dead next year. You want something shiny, small, and valuable right now. Something you can carry with you. So, the Lydians took chunks of electrum, a natural mix of gold and silver, and stamped the king's seal on them. The first true coins. But the genius wasn't the coin itself. The genius was the psychological trick the king built around it. A king would give these new coins to his soldiers, then he would declare that the only way ordinary citizens could pay their taxes was with those exact same coins. Think about that for a second. Suddenly, every farmer, baker, and blacksmith in the kingdom needed to get their hands on those coins to pay the tax collector. How did they get them? By selling food, weapons, and supplies to the soldiers. The king basically forced his entire population to feed and supply his army, and all he had to do was hand out stamped pieces of metal. Coinage wasn't invented to make shopping easier. It was invented to feed armies. Wherever you find ancient coins in the archaeological record, you find violence. The Roman Empire stamped millions of silver denarii, not to help citizens buy bread, but to pay the legions. When the Roman Empire collapsed, coinage largely disappeared from Western Europe for centuries. People just went back to keeping ledgers. Because without a massive army to pay, physical coins weren't strictly necessary. The idea that money has to be a physical object with intrinsic value is a relatively new invention. And it's an illusion. Now, look at your life today. You get a paycheck every 2 weeks, but they don't hand you gold. They don't even hand you paper anymore. A computer in a bank updates a digital ledger. The numbers in your account go up. When you buy groceries, you tap a plastic card on a machine. Your numbers go down. The grocery store's numbers go up. No physical value actually moves anywhere. You are doing the exact same thing the Sumerians did on clay tablets 6,000 years ago. You are doing the exact same thing the Yap Islanders did with a giant rock at the bottom of the sea. You are participating in a shared hallucination. We traded meat for memory. We traded memory for clay. We traded clay for gold, gold for paper, and paper for light on a screen. But underneath all of it, the system hasn't changed. Money is, and always has been, just a promise. A promise that the effort you put into the world today will be recognized and honored by someone else tomorrow. It took us 300,000 years to build a system where billions of strangers can trust each other enough to trade across oceans, build skyscrapers, and launch rockets, all based on an invisible concept we just made up. We solved the problem of trust so completely that we forgot it was ever a problem. Every stock market, every bank, every digital wallet on this planet exists because someone handed a piece of meat to their neighbor and trusted they would be fed when winter came. We built the modern world on a foundation of pure imagination, and that's the most human thing there is. So let me ask you this. If the system of money completely collapsed tomorrow and we had to go back to relying on social trust, what is the one skill or item you would trade with your neighbor to survive? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Thank you for watching.